Okay, so when you hear the name Lord Byron, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably dusty old books, right? Maybe some complicated poetry you had to read in school, but that's not even half the story. Today, we're going to look at Byron not just as a poet, but as a cultural architect, a guy who literally designed a type of character so powerful, we are still completely obsessed with it 200 years later.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? And get this, that wasn't a line from one of his poems. Nope, that was a description from one of his lovers, Lady Caroline Lamb. This one quote just perfectly sets the stage for a man whose real life was every bit as dramatic, if not more so, than his art. It just captures that scandalous, magnetic personality that made him an absolute legend.
And I'm serious here. You can forget everything you think you know about 19th century poets being stuffy and boring. Byron was a full-blown phenomenon. He had the fame, the scandals, the rebellious attitude, and tons of adoring fans. His life wasn't just some backdrop for his work, it was the work. He was a pop cultural icon way before that term even existed.
And the stories about him just prove he wasn't just writing about rebellion, he was living it every single day. At Cambridge, they had a rule against keeping dogs, so what does he do? He gets a pet bear. Totally logical. He found a human skull on his property and thought, you know what this would be good for? A drinking goblet. His life was so wild that after he died, his own friends burned his memoirs just to protect his reputation. This wasn't some act, this was just him.
So the big question is, how did this chaotic, rebellious life actually turn into revolutionary literature? Well, the answer is that Byron's poetry wasn't just inspired by his experiences, it was basically forged in them. His art and his life were totally intertwined.
I mean, his life was a total whirlwind. He becomes a lord at just 10 years old, but also inherits a crumbling estate and a mountain of debt. He goes to Cambridge and channels all that frustration into just, well, rebelling against everything. Then boom, he writes this poem, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and becomes a superstar overnight. But he couldn't sit still, so he eventually leaves England and dies as a revolutionary hero in Greece. Aristocrat, celebrity, freedom fighter, he did all that before he even turned 37.
So it's really no surprise what his major themes ended up being. His fight for Greek independence, that fueled his obsession with liberty. All his travels across Europe, that totally shaped his view of nature as this powerful, overwhelming force. And his countless scandalous love affairs, they gave us some of the most complex, passionate writing about love and heartbreak ever put to paper.
But here's what really made him stand out. While all his poet buddies were writing these earnest, idealistic poems about nature being a gentle teacher, Byron was cynical, witty, and deeply personal. He used satire to make fun of society's hypocrisy, and he saw nature not as some calm guide, but as a wild, powerful force that pretty much mirrored his own chaotic inner world. He absolutely shattered the mold.
And all of this, the rebellious life, the cynical worldview, it was all building towards his greatest creation. Because you see, Byron's most lasting contribution to our culture wasn't just one poem or one book. It was an entire character archetype. It was a psychological blueprint for the modern anti-hero.
He basically invented a personality type. You know the one, the brooding, intelligent, morally gray outsider. And it's a personality that has been copied and reimagined in our stories ever since. He probably thought he was just writing about himself, but in doing that, he tapped into something completely universal.
This classic definition really gets to the core of it. A Byronic hero isn't a simple villain. He's this complex mix of contradictions. He's arrogant, but he's also miserable. He's cynical about all of humanity, but he's also capable of this incredibly intense love. It's that internal conflict that makes him so darn fascinating.
So how do you make one? Well, here's the basic recipe. You start with a huge dose of emotional intensity. Then you add a dash of moral ambiguity. He's not a good guy, but he's not totally evil either. You got to give him a dark, mysterious past that haunts him. Then mix in a sharp intellect and this magnetic, seductive charm. And that last part is so crucial, we're drawn to him because he's broken, not in spite of it.
And the second he created this hero, the world took notice. This archetype started spreading like wildfire, echoing through the pages of literature and, eventually, making its way into pretty much every corner of our culture.
Of course, Byron perfected this character in his own work. You have Childe Harold, the alienated wanderer. You have the Giaour, who's the vengeful lover totally consumed by grief. And even his Don Juan, which is more of a satire, uses that classic hero's charm to expose how hypocritical the world around him is. He showed everyone just how versatile this character could be.
And other writers immediately ran with it. I mean, think about it. Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights, passionate, vengeful, haunted by his past. That is a pure Byronic hero. Even Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, with his pride and his moodiness and that mysterious vibe he gives off at first, he's got that Byronic DNA. So does the brilliant but arrogant Victor Frankenstein. The influence was immediate and it was undeniable.
So, let's bring this all home. Why does some 19th century poet still matter so much in our world of streaming services and TikTok? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. Ultimately, it all boils down to this. Byron didn't just write poems, he created this incredibly durable, iconic figure. The flawed, passionate rebel is a character we just instinctively understand and are drawn to, and it all started with him.
And here is the final takeaway. Almost every complicated anti-hero you love watching on screen today, from tormented superheroes to charismatic villains, owes a debt to Lord Byron. He wrote the original blueprint. He gave us the original bad boy that we just can't help but root for. And that leaves us with one final question for you. When you look at the movies, the TV shows, the books you love, who fits the bill? Who are the proud, moody, and charismatic rebels of our time? Because once you start looking for it, I promise, you'll start seeing the ghost of Lord Byron everywhere.